For the last 5 months, we've been receiving distressing video from a part of Myanmar that's closed to the outside world. The Burmese government wants to keep what's happening secret. The United Nations gives us their devastating judgment.
Definite crimes against humanity.
This is a country still emerging from decades of military rule. But we meet those who've been left behind in a 21st century Muslim ghetto.
What would happen if you went out that gate?
And we ask whether Myanmar's democracy icon has sacrificed her principles in pursuit of power.
Ms. Suu Kyi, the United Nations has accused this country of committing crimes against humanity. Do you have any response to that?
November 2016. Thousands of Myanmar's Rohingya Muslim minority are fleeing. They've been called the world's most unwanted people. In Myanmar, they're denied citizenship and the most basic of human rights. They're escaping a conflict that flared when this group of Rohingya militants attacked police checkpoints, killing 9 officers and seizing guns and ammunition. These distressing images captured by a Burmese policeman show a glimpse of the state's response. They called it clearance operations. Civilians, as well as militants, have been targeted. Unable to reach the conflict area in Myanmar, we're across the border in Bangladesh, where 70,000 Rohingya have fled over the past 5 months. Mohammed Salam arrived here 3 months ago, and he agrees to take us back to the banks of the River Naf, where so many of the Rohingya have crossed from Myanmar into Bangladesh.
যখন সকাল হয়েছিল তখন মিলিটারি আইরে আমাদের গ্রামের থেকে আমার যে বাড়ির পাশের থেকে আমাদের পাড়ার উপর যখন গোলাগুলি করছিল ওরা ওদের এখানে করছিল.
When the gunfire started, Mohammed wanted to help his 75-year-old father escape.
আর বাবা হদ্দ না ফুতন তোরা জগয় আই মরলে মরি তোরা হলে বাসা বলে হয় আর দুলা দিলাই.
Mohammed's village, Shoto Gozabil, was soon on fire. All our smartphone footage has been given to us by a group that's been meticulously documenting events and verifying video. The government accepts that at least 25 people died here, but have claimed that the Rohingya have been torching their own homes across the area. Later, Mohammed returned to look for his father.
গরবারে ফুরা দিয়ে আমাদের সাইড দিয়ে আর বেশি মানুষ সকল ফুরি ফুরি ওরে লাগুরি গুরি হাঁটতে হাঁটতে ওরে ফুরি থেকে আর কিছুর মাথা আছে কিছুর নলা দূর নলা গাম পাই.
Mohammed tells us he believes his father's body is among the charred remains.
গুলি মারছিল আবার ধাক্কা দিয়া ঘরের ভিতর দিয়ে আগুনে পুরা দিয়েছিল. আমার পরিবারের সাথে বলে না এই কথাটা আজকে বলছি. আমার পরিবারকে বললাম অন্য পাড়াতে আছে এইটা বললাম. আজকে বলছি আমার বাবা মৃত্যু হয়েছে. এই কথাটা বলি.
A year ago, Burmese history had seemed set on a very different path. Released from house arrest, national heroine and democracy icon Aung San Suu Kyi had secured a huge election win. Overnight, decades of brutal military rule came to a remarkably peaceful end. The world's hopes were high, both for Suu Kyi and for Myanmar.
Aung San Suu Kyi now spends most of her time in the Burmese capital, Naypyidaw. But when I first moved here 3 years ago, I went to see her a number of times in her house here in Yangon. A place made famous, of course, because that was where she spent so many years under house arrest.
It was from above these gates that Suu Kyi would speak out against the country's military rulers, rousing her many supporters with speeches about human rights. Around the world, Suu Kyi became famous for her principled resistance against the generals.
I was a prisoner, but I felt that I was free because I was not frightened. So for me, real freedom is freedom from fear.
But Suu Kyi's hard-won freedom and power have their limits. Despite her election win, the Burmese generals have refused to hand over control of key ministries and the security forces. On the plight of the Rohingya, Suu Kyi has been noticeably silent. In Balu Kelly camp in Bangladesh, Sano Ara is fearing for her daughter's life. She tells me that 2 months ago, Burmese soldiers came to her village and started rounding up Rohingya children.
And do you know where your daughter is now?
Since October, the United Nations and human rights groups have reported hundreds of cases of murder, rape and abduction. Under international pressure to do something, Aung San Suu Kyi set up an investigation team. There are no Rohingya in it, and it's led by this man, Myint Sway, the vice president and a former general. Its work has been criticised by the United Nations. Here, investigators are interviewing a Rohingya woman called Jamalida. She's telling them how she saw a group of women forced into the bushes by soldiers. It was broadcast on state TV as proof that no rape was taking place. Months later, we tracked down Jamalida. She's now in a refugee camp in Bangladesh. She told us that she'd spoken freely to the government investigation after being promised she'd face no reprisals. Jamalida told us she had yet to recover from what the soldiers did to her back in Myanmar. But what of the country's leader, Myanmar's human rights champion?
What do you think of Aung San Suu Kyi now?
The Burmese authorities have refused to allow the outside world into the affected part of Myanmar. But they can't stop the refugees talking. At the airport, as she prepared to leave Bangladesh, United Nations envoy Yang Hee told me she was shocked by what she'd heard.
I would say crimes against humanity. Definite crimes against humanity.
Committed by the Burmese army against the Rohingya?
Yes. By the Burmese by the Myanmar military, border guard, or the police or the security forces.
Crimes against humanity is obviously very serious. How much responsibility should Myanmar's leader, Aung San Suu Kyi, bear for this?
At the end of the day, it is the government, the civilian government, that has to answer and respond to these massive cases of horrific torture and very inhumane crimes they have committed against their own people.
These crimes took place in Myanmar's Rakhine state. The northern part, where the Rohingyas have fled from, is remote and under military lockdown. The closest we can get is the town of Sitwe. Sitwe used to be a mixed town, with Buddhists and Rohingya Muslims living side by side. Now, the once busy central mosque lies abandoned. It's been that way since 2012, when Rakhine State saw weeks of violence between the Buddhist and Muslim communities. The security forces took the side of the majority Buddhists and stood by as Rohingya were forced from their homes and out of Sitwe. On the streets and in the tea shops, it's hard to find anyone with much sympathy for their departed Rohingya neighbours. Many of them see the Rohingya as illegal immigrants who belong in Bangladesh.
Could you see a day when the Rohingya will come back here and the Buddhists and the Rohingya will live side by side?
No. What is the solution to the problems here?
There is one small community of Rohingya who refuse to leave Sitwe. Checkpoints mark the entrance to Ong Mingala. It's a Muslim ghetto. This is Myanmar's version of apartheid. Almost 4,000 Rohingya live here. It's an island in Sitwe, surrounded on all sides by Buddhist homes. The fence and the police keep the two communities apart. At the entrance, we're met by Zorzor, a Rohingya community leader. Moments later, we had company.
Police? Are you from police? Do you mind leaving us alone? Are the secret police always inside the camp? You really? What would happen if you went out that gate? Beaten by who? Every other day there's a list given to the police, and then those people who are on the list are allowed to leave, and there's an escort organised by the police to protect the Rohingya when they go out of here so that they don't get attacked.
We go with Zorzor to midday prayers. There have been Muslims living in Rakhine State for centuries. This mosque dates back almost 140 years. When Sitwe burnt in 2012, Zorzor was among the Rohingya who stood their ground and refused to leave.
Were you expecting Aung San Suu Kyi to be more sympathetic to the plight of the Rohingya?
နေရာယူထားတာပဲရှိတယ်သူမှဘာမှပါဝါမရှိဘူးကျွန်တော်အမြင်ယူမဆိုင်ဘူးလေဘာမှသူလာပြတာမတွေ့ဘူးကျွန်တော်တို့ကသူကတကယ်ပဲမြန်မာနိုင်ငံကြီးကိုပြောင်းလဲနိုင်မဲ့လူလို့ပထမထင်ခဲ့တာဒါပေမဲ့သူအာဏာရတာတစ်နှစ်ပြည့်တော့မယ်ဘာတစ်ခုမှမတွေ့ရဘူးမတွေ့တော့ယုံကြည်ကျွန်တော်တို့လည်းတဖြည်းဖြည်းနဲ့မျောလင့်ချက်ပေါ့မျောလင့်ချက်ထားလို့မရတော့ဘူးဖြစ်သွားတယ်
Aung San Suu Kyi has never visited a Rohingya camp, but she has tried to reach out to Myanmar's other ethnic minorities. We followed her to the other side of the country, to the east and Shan State, where her plane touched down at Heiho Airport.
Somewhere down there is Aung San Suu Kyi.
Suu Kyi hasn't given an interview to a Burmese journalist or even held a proper press conference since winning the election 16 months ago.
Maybe 15, 16, 17, 18, they're still coming. All those cars part of Aung San Suu Kyi's procession here, but very, very much at arm's length, as journalists have from her for the last year or so since she came to power. Very difficult to get to her and to speak to her and to really ask her about anything that's been going on here. She's not someone who seems to enjoy being questioned.
In a cafe in the Shan town of Taunji, I meet someone who's also trying to get a word with Suu Kyi.
She has to say something to stop the violence and the fighting, and it's going on, and she didn't say anything.
Tay has spent her entire life documenting abuses against women from her ethnic group, the Shan. She tells me that reports of Burmese army atrocities against the Rohingya are chillingly familiar.
The army, they told their troops, you can do whatever you like. They can kill anybody, they can rape anybody, they can rob, they can burn things. It's a political rape. You rape the woman, it means that you rape the whole ethnicity.
Of course, this isn't news to Aung San Suu Kyi. We watched a speech she made shortly after being released from house arrest.
Rape is used in my country as a weapon by armed forces to intimidate the ethnic nationalities and to divide our country. So we must do everything we can to put an end to this. Violence starts in the
Just up the road, the crowds are gathering for a chance to see Suu Kyi. It's Union Day, a big event in the national calendar. The government recognises more than 100 different ethnic groups. But Burmese history has been dominated by the largest, the Burmans, who make up 2/3 of the population. That's left many of the minorities fighting long-running rebel wars to try and get their voices heard. The 1 million Rohingya in Myanmar aren't recognised as an ethnic group, so they haven't been invited. Waiting among the crowd is Tay. She's hoping that this will be her chance to speak to Suu Kyi. It's not clear whether Suu Kyi hears.
People are also silent, and maybe she also silent because she loved that institution.
The army.
In the past, it was for freedom or fear. Now, fear of freedom.
Suu Kyi now sits silently with the generals. She knows she needs their support if she's to deliver her biggest policy goal, a nationwide peace agreement. Suu Kyi tells the crowd what they already know, that the country is suffering from disunity and from conflict. Then the Nobel Peace Prize winner makes her plea to the nation. For all the talk, Suu Kyi's peace plan isn't going very well. The ethnic groups think she's now too close to the army, and the last year has seen an increase in fighting. Since she came to power, all our requests to speak to Miss Suu Kyi have been rejected. So there was time for one more, rather desperate try.
Ms. Suu Kyi, BBC, can I just answer your question, please? Ms. Suu Kyi, the United Nations has accused this country of committing crimes against humanity. Do you have any response to that? Ms. Suu Kyi? So off she goes in her bubble, surrounded by her advisors. She just doesn't like people putting difficult questions to her.
With Suu Kyi unwilling to talk, we arranged to meet one of her oldest political allies.
Hello.
Wintain is the spokesman for the National League for Democracy, Suu Kyi's party. I put to him the question that Tay had wanted to ask, why Suu Kyi isn't speaking out.
Not because he doesn't care, but because if she says something, it will get worse, or if she says nothing, it's quite a dilemma.
So you think the criticism which has been levelled against Aung San Suu Kyi, particularly over the treatment of the Rohingya in Rakhine State, you think that's unfair, that she couldn't do anything if she wanted to stop the abuses?
Well, I won't say that she couldn't do anything, but we are still finding ways. As a new government, which is trying to achieve true democratic country, we have thousands of problems.
But it's a serious problem. The UN has said that maybe crimes against humanity are taking place
Well,
there.
we don't believe that it's crime against humanity. It is an international affair. It's not an international affair.
And does she take on board what people are saying when they say that it doesn't seem like she cares about the human rights of the Rohingya, for example?
Again, your question becomes Rohingya. So please change the subject.
But hundreds of them have been killed. That's why we're raising the issue.
Not hundreds. It's exaggeration.
For most Burmese, life in the last few years has certainly changed for the better. But the Rohingya and all those who are still being abused by the Burmese army are still waiting, and hope is fading. So far, the price of power for Aung San Suu Kyi has been silence on principles and values that she once held so dear.